here today with Rob Hatch, who coaches business owners, executives, and teams, guiding them through critical transitions in their organization. And he brings a unique blend of knowledge and background in human development and experience as a successful business leader himself. His newsletter, which is weekly, is read by tens of thousands worldwide. He's the best-selling author of Attention, The Power of Simple Decisions in a Distracted World. And his new book is called Success Frames, Why Learning from Success is the Key to Understanding What Motivates and Inspires Us. So first of all, welcome back, Rob. This is not your first rodeo, right?
No, it is not. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate
Well, I
it,
mean,
Alice.
you write another book. I want to hear about it. And the premise behind Success Frames is really interesting because there is, I think, a very widely accepted narrative, isn't there? That failure, yeah, it's amazing. This is how we learn. Tell us why that's maybe not the whole truth.
Well, I've always had this sense that failure was never a great teacher for me. I don't like working with my back up against the wall. I'm not a person who thrives on being put in precarious positions, right? I think we all want to find some like piece of ground that we can stand on and then take steps forward. Um, Failure has for so long been touted as this wonderful teacher, but again, I've always had this sense that the lessons of failure, I could never really access them. It was more a story that I think we've told ourselves that we can't really understand what failure teaches us until we achieve success after failure. So it's the success actually that is more instructive. Success teaches us how we do, what we do well, what choices we made, what actions we took, what resources we lean on. So it's the how really that of our how did we manage to achieve success? Yes, we were once further behind. Maybe we failed at an attempt, but I'm not mining those lessons for anything that would tell me what to do. It just
What
tells
not
me
to
what
do,
not to
right?
do.
And there is something
So,
powerful about that. There is that. I sometimes think perhaps one of the reasons that we've got to where we are is that the opposite mistake almost is to not tolerate failure, which is equally unhelpful.
right. I agree. I agree. And again, I'm not saying there aren't any lessons in failure or that it doesn't have something to teach us. I just think success in any form, it doesn't have to be some big, grand accomplishment or achievement. We can have small successes all day long. Um, but it's far more instructive to, particularly as an individual, particularly in terms of what we need in order to be successful, what supports us, who are the people that we reach out to, what books do we
Mm.
read, how do we get there, and how do we put this information together. When I think about if someone, for example, is attempting, an exercise regimen, right, and they've set out um, to run every single day, and they make it, 30 days in, and then they miss one. I There's this tendency, I think, to think that we failed at that goal that we set out to do, which was every day. So I'm also not a fan of every day setting something to do every single day because stuff comes up. But I don't think there's much of a lesson in that 30th day, the day that we missed, or the 31st day that we missed. I want to know, how did you
Mm.
manage to do this for 30 days? What
29
what
days.
kept you going? And all the things that enabled that are far more interesting and appealing to me to understand how you do what you do. How did you manage to set yourself up that way?
And it reminds me as well of appreciative inquiry, that inquiry, I think you'd say,
Mhm.
which is that sense that when you're asking questions of people in coaching, you're focusing on what's working and helping
Yeah.
them not just understand it better, but actually see it in the first place sometimes.
I think that's true because we do tend to go to that place of feeling one that we've failed, that we're not good enough. People talk all the time about imposter syndrome and all sorts of things that play with our mind to set us back. And honestly, with success, helping someone to identify what worked, no matter how big or how small, again, it gives you that little piece of ground. It restores the locus of control,
Yeah.
the personal agency that we need to say, yes, I've been here before. I've been in a pinch and I've navigated my way through it. And so my role as a coach would be help me understand what you did the last time you faced this. I use some examples in the book where, we've gotten a job, we got into college, things that we just think we're supposed to do. But the how you
Mm.
got the job, how did you study consistently enough to get the grades required to go on to the college that you most wanted to get into? All of those things, there's a story there, and I think it's far more powerful
Yeah.
um, individually than than somehow looking at what's why you failed right now, why you lost the most recent job.
And I remember when
Um,
you and I were talking about this concept, and I had a real kind of, but of course, that's more powerful. I mean, why haven't we seen this? But what I really love about what you've done as well is say, well, and this is how you do that. This is this, and you talk
mm,
about. So just tell us a little bit about what you mean by success frames and that process of interrogating the success.
sure. Well, I think it starts with being someone who is willing to be reflective about what went on in a situation. So, reflective practice is something that was introduced by a man named Daniel Schoen a long time ago, but that he just kind of came up for the words of looking back intentionally on what you do and how you do
Mm.
it, and trying to sort of find the threads of so that you can improve. So it starts for me with looking back and leveraging any success that I can grasp onto. Uh, Again, it could be that I made it 2 weeks of a diet, um, and losing weight, and I want to know, all right, how did I manage to do that? How did I manage to eat consistently and exercise consistently? Looking back at what you did, and then thinking about it in terms of sort of broader actions. Like, I know that, well, the most easy example for me, one of my success frames I talked extensively about in attention was put success in your way. I know that for willpower is limited. I know that too many decisions will distract me. And also know that habits are really powerful neurobiological forces. And so if I look at those three things, I think about, what do I need to prepare myself to do this thing? What do I need to have to be able to get myself out the door for that run? What do I need to, if it's a big presentation that's coming up, what do I need to do to be successful? How can I tap into a previous experience, not a failure, but a previous experience where I was successful, and say, that felt good. Um, how did I do that? How did I, how did I talk to people? Did I do research? Did I rehearse? So then it becomes this very broad, I do better when I prepare. Well, what does
Mm.
preparation look like for you? Preparation looks like me spending time rehearsing. It looks like
Mm.
me doing online research, but also talking with some people. It looks like, whatever those things might be, uh, and trying to identify them. It's not always an easy thing, but especially if we get a little mired in our head about not having done well.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the magic of this, isn't it? Is that when we are focusing on failure, there's a sort of there's a certain energy, a certain state of mind associated with that, which is not always the most helpful. But when we are, it's almost visualization, isn't it? And all the kind of positive stuff around that. That when we're focusing on what we do well, when we're focusing on when we're at our best, there's a neurological state associated with that that is perhaps more helpful for, because habits are formed by positive emotion, right?
Yeah, and if I can tap into, um, and there's so many examples of this in my own life, we tolerate frustration and pain in our lives so often. Little things like even the way that our houses are set up, or our office or whatever, little piles of things. We tolerate it for whatever reason, like, well, I'll fix that, I'll get to that. But when finally, here, just this is the silliest example, but people often struggle uh, with, like, trying to get out the door in the morning, and they can't find the keys to their car, right? And they'll search the whole house, and where did I leave them? Did I leave them in my pocket? Did I leave them? Did you have them? And they're blaming spouses and any other driver.
I thought this was just
So
our
there's
house.
a
This is quite
pain,
encouraging.
and so you go through that, and there's this pain, like, that you're willing to endure, and it happens time and time and time again. And then one day, like, how to solve this problem, right? It's just like, let's all put them in this little bowl.
It's really not a hard problem.
It's not a hard problem to fix, but we still don't fix it. The pain isn't enough. If, however, we think, all right, let's do this. Let's commit to putting them in the bowl, and everyone does it. The feeling of having them ready over and over and over again, that success, that good emotion, like, I that is what fuels your ability to keep doing it over and over again, because you're so grateful. And this, one of my books that I love is Emotional Success by David DeSteno, and he talks about the power of gratitude as and compassion as well. So if I have compassion for my future
Yeah.
self, in this case, I don't, maybe I don't want to go through that pain, but also there is this, I know that person is going to be, so future me will be so grateful to have the keys right there.
Yeah.
And then it fuels, um, this, one of the things that he points out in his book is it actually fuels willpower. Once you start to experience that gratitude and the feeling of success, basically,
Mm.
it it fuels your desire to want to repeat it.
It changes
Um,
your sense of who you are as well, doesn't it? Suddenly, I'm the kind of person who always knows where their car keys are. I mean, that's an
yes,
identity
right.
shift.
And what a weird thing to hang your hat on, but it's a pretty great thing.
Yeah.
Because, and that's what I mean by small successes too, because it doesn't have to be this massive success. You figured that out, like, great. You know how to organize certain aspects of your life. So if
You
that's
can
all
build on
if
it.
that's the only scrap I've got, I want to work with you to build on that.
Yeah. That's so cool. And I want to talk to you about writing as well, Rob, because I'm always really interested when somebody's written their second book. Suddenly, you've got a comparison point, right?
Mhm.
What was it like? Did you go into writing the second book in a different state to going into writing the first? What did you learn? What did you apply?
Oh my gosh.
There's a whole
Well,
success frames conversation around writing books here, isn't
there is, and there were many things that I did similarly. I really thought about how I wrote the first one. I structured my thinking in a similar way. I like to start with kind of the, well, as you've, you know uh, laid out in the business book challenge, uh, having the chapters laid out for me is really helpful, with little blurbs. It's always been helpful, and just having those sort of key points, like, I know essentially what I'm going to write in each chapter, and that clarity helps me to just sit down and write. But also, as you know, with this second book, the first time I handed it over to you, it did not hit the mark. But let's even go back a step further. Was I was feeling a little, maybe a little cocky, let's just say, that, you know when I reached out to you and said I'm ready, you said your first response was, let's do that. You need to do the challenge again. And at first I kind of balked at that, but I was so grateful for that advice, because there was, I that is a success frame. Having gone through that structure, one, it helped me. It was such a much better book coming out of that challenge. And then I wrote, and honestly, I wrote through a period of time there was a lot of grief and upheaval in my life, and so things got a little, um, it became a little harder to navigate. But when I turned it into you, and you paused, like as only someone writing back an email can pause, for like a little couple of days longer than I expected, and I thought, she doesn't like
Uh-oh.
it. I knew it. I knew it right off. I was like, oh, this is, and she's struggling with what to say to me right now. But you gave me some really excellent feedback, that and what it allowed me to do was to go back to the point of the book, because I feel like I ended up getting a little lost. And so I went back to what makes this work? What made attention work? Let's go
Mm.
back to the structure, to try and tell the story, to uh, basically, you had let me know that I hadn't quite landed the plane in terms of communicating the fullness of the idea. Lots of great stuff, but it hadn't quite landed it. And I
And
think
and
I knew that.
just to chip in from my perspective as well, I mean that's kind of the summary. Lots of great stuff, but it didn't quite hang together. And it's so interesting when you see that, you're like, but it's really, each individual bit's really good. And it it's about trying to help somebody see that the energy, the trajectory, the sort of the golden thread of the thing has got lost in the individual stories.
Hmm.
And there's a real energy about a business book, and it's a slow burn energy. It's not like, we're used to reading these quick things, and you write newsletters, and
Yeah.
you write LinkedIn posts, and a book is different because each one has to build, and it has to create this slower, more thoughtful, but no less coherent kind of energy. And I think I'm a big fan of writing books episodically, because I don't see how you can do them any other way when you have a day job. But the danger of that is that they read episodically, and
Yeah.
that's the big challenge, I think, for most business book writers. And you absolutely rose to it, and the finished thing has got that build through it. It has got that coherence and energy. So you took it on the chin, and you
I
rose to the challenge.
Well, as I've shared with you before, like of course, we all have egos and stuff, but that's why I like working with you. I want that perspective. I mean, you're so experienced and knowledgeable. Your insights, have been invaluable. So when I think about one of the components of a success frame, of my success frame for writing a business book, it starts with, it starts with you, and going to using that structure, that you helped me find in taking that, business book challenge. I
It's
had the idea, but I didn't have it all threaded together in either book, really.
Yeah, that is the challenge, isn't it? You've got to take that kind of insight, that one big idea, and pull it into the book. But what's really interesting, and I think you did this as well, is often when I do those kinds of bits of feedback, this is great, this is great, this is great, and here's what I see as the issue. 9 times out, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, somebody will come back and go, "I knew you were going to say that."
Yeah.
It's so funny, because I've been thinking, "How am I going to tell them this? How am I going to?" And they know. They just
Yeah.
needed somebody to articulate it to them. It's really interesting.
And I think, this is where, let's look at this in terms of success frames and failure. One might argue that here was a failure point, right? That you gave me feedback, this is not working, and that I learned from it. However, what it did was pointed to the problem. That's it gave me sort of a guardrail to say it's
It's
it's not
information.
doing this thing.
Mm,
The That doesn't teach me how to fix the problem. It just points out the problem. And that's where success, like leaning on past success. I know how to thread a
mm.
story. I know how to round this out in a way, and make sure that things are landing the way that they should. I've done that before. I know how to do that just generally as a writer. I didn't do it in the first draft, but so I needed to go back to my prior success. I went back and reread the proposal from the challenge and looked at all the promises that I felt like I made, and was I delivering on those promises? So that, so I,
That's a
yeah,
great reason for doing a proposal, isn't it? It
oh,
becomes your North Star. And
it
without
really
that,
does.
it's so easy to get lost.
Obviously I've loved that process, and I've recommended it to, as many people as I can, because I
Stopping
do find
strangers
it
on the
so
street.
helpful. Yeah, anyone who even whispers at writing a book, it is, let me tell you how, how to do this. Not me, but let me point you in the right direction, because Allison will help you do this. It really
Well,
is invaluable.
yeah, I think it's a great process, and I didn't invent the proposal document, but I think that the questions that a publisher needs to know if this book is going to be a commercial proposition are the same questions that you need to be asking yourself. However you plan to write this book or publish it.
And
But I'm
so
going to
there's a
ask
good
you.
point. You could
Oh, go
ask
on.
those, you could look at a proposal and try to ask those questions. But the support that you give in that process of really asking those questions, of reviewing each section thoughtfully, of pushing back on someone to look for comparables, and you're just the statement for each chapter, all of those little things, has it's a refining process, and so to have that feedback, that's the gold stuff for me.
It's hard to do it alone, isn't it? You sort of need a sparring partner in it,
Hmm.
somebody to bounce ideas off. Well, as you know, and I'm going to do it again because I've already done it to you once. I'm going to ask you for your best tip. Let's take do the proposal challenge as a standard. What else would you tell somebody who's about to write a business book?
uh, be patient with yourself.
Mm.
Honestly, patience, and identifying, the conditions under which you do your best writing, finding ways to set yourself, to put success in your way, to set yourself up so that, whether, I don't care if you write it by hand, I don't care what program you use, if you need to use, I do a lot of morning journaling using something called Ohm Writer. You could do it in Google Docs. The tools don't matter. To me, I don't think but I think it's worth thinking about what's going to work for you, and the figuring out the conditions under which you do your best work, and setting
And
that
that's
up.
such a great point. That's kind of part of the success frenzy we didn't really touch on is that you become, it's a reflective practice, and it's taking action, but there's a sort of experimentation phase in there as well, isn't it? Well, what does work? Let me try something. And if it doesn't work, that's information. But if it does work, let's double down on that.
Yeah. I mean, in every aspect of, aside from writing, I like to think about, like, how do I want to wake up in the morning? Like, what do I want around me? What do I want that experience to be like when I go to bed, when I wake up from my day? Do I want to grab my phone? Do I want to, wake up to quiet music or sunlight, or how do I want? And we get to shape that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's that sort of locus of control, is I think sometimes we forget that we have, from the moment we wake up, there are places where we have control over what that looks like and what works best for us. And it can change over time, but I like to think about giving people that control, reminding them at least that they have that control.
And that it can start really small, like where you
Mhm.
put your keys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you put your
All of
keys.
that. Yeah. Which has disproportionate impact on your quality of life.
Mhm.
What book would you recommend us, Rob?
So I already mentioned the David DeSteno book, which I love. And we were joking about this before, that my go-to business book is always Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. But the book that
You have to have we have to have another one. Come on.
we always have to have that. But really, the book I was going to recommend is When by Dan Pink. And
Yes.
I, it, there's so many books that, of the three books I mentioned, that I feel like I just, I take these big, or sometimes simple ideas from, and rather than just thinking of them as a business book, I think of them as books that address the human condition on some level, and emotionally, how we think, how we feel, the value of our emotions, the value of our energy in terms of Dan Pink, and understanding, you know, when we, when is the best time for us to be doing certain
Yeah.
things. I'm now a frequent napper because now an almost everyday napper because of that, and it's changed my whole structure of energy throughout the day because I take time to step away and give myself a break. So it's books
Yeah.
like that that help explain our behavior, that then can be translated to effective action inside an organization. Um, I think most organizations now, employees and organizations, are looking to be, as always, they always have, but more so now than ever, are looking to be seen
Mm.
for who they are, to be understood, to have some freedom, to have some flexibility, to have someone who helps kind of tease out their strengths, their past success. And that to me was part of the goal here, was to think about how can organizations move from just managing people to coaching people to their
Yeah.
strengths, to their personal strengths, not necessarily strengths that you would score in an evaluation, but what do you understand, helping people understand what they need to do their best work, and how can we provide it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting matrix of organizational strengths and personal strengths and organizational goals and personal goals, isn't it? There's something really fascinating about that.
Yeah,
Yeah. But your Awareness is a terrific book. And it also, incidentally, helped me understand my teenage children better as well. So, if nothing else, worth reading for that. Yeah.
it's parenting, I think, is one of the best, um, for with other parents, it's a wonderful reference point, because
Yeah.
so often when I'm talking to people, I'll use a parenting reference, and
Yeah.
every time it's such a hook, like, and it helps them understand themselves better, their teenager better, because we're stopping and thinking, oh my gosh, right, like I would never have wanted, you know,
Mm.
my parents to do this, or that, and it helps me to helps slow things down. So I love parenting references, anything that hints at that, because it's all human development. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Again, it's comes down to personal and professional development, and you can't separate the two. The professional is always going to be personal.
Mm. It's also a really good sort of micro space in which to try out interactions because you see results so quickly with
Yes,
kids, don't you? It's really interesting. Yeah.
absolutely.
Rob, if people want to find out more about you, more about attention and success frames, but also your newsletter and all the work that you do, where should they go?
You can just go to robhatch.com. That's the easiest place to connect with me. You can email me, rob@robhatch.com. I actually like people emailing. So anytime anyone has a question about something in the book, and I think I put that in the book, so in both books, actually, like, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from people. So that's the best way to connect. You can sign up for my newsletter there as well. A nice little, the pop up that people hate will be there. So you can sign up for the newsletter and connect.
Amazing. And it's not often actually people say, yes, just email me. Email me. I'd love to hear from you. So that's a really generous way to end. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been such fun. Thanks so much.